Hello, everybody, and welcome to Office Hours. I am Willie Mayette, creator of Jazz Edge, in case you happen to be joining me on YouTube or Facebook and don't know who you're looking at. So in Office Hours, you're welcome to ask me any music-related questions that you might have. So hello to everybody. Before I take questions, I want to show you guys something new and something which I think is going to be a little bit better for all of you. All right, so first of all, let's switch over to this view. Let's go here. So on the dashboard now, you see that I put this up here, this Confident Improviser podcast, okay? And what you'll also notice is underneath here, I know it's a little bit small, but you'll see right up in here, underneath the Confident Improviser, this first option here is for the podcast. What I've done is I've created its own lesson page. So let me just show you this a little bit bigger. So you click here, you go down to podcast, and that's going to take you to the podcast page. So what I've done now here on the podcast page is I've listed out all of the podcast video episodes. So you can go ahead and watch those, and all of the sheet music is there as well. The only little gotcha that I want to make sure you guys are aware of is if you're used to seeing the video here and then clicking down here where it says sheet music and resource, it's going to say the podcast resources are on the main podcast page, on the main lesson page under podcast resources. So that means just go back to where it says podcast right here. Okay, and then again, those resources are right over here, right? I've also made it so you can see exactly what the title of the podcast is. So it should be a little bit easier for you to be able to manage and kind of, browse around that podcast. All right, so hello, Robbie. Hello, David. How you guys doing? And then to all my friends here in Zoom, Devin, Joe, Tom, Bruce, Ronald, Marilyn, Kevin, and Michelle. Hello, Michelle. How are you? All right. So, Michelle, you had a question here. Willie, you mentioned yesterday a podcast related to the Chick Corea gig. Where is that going to be posted? Well, now you know where it's going to get posted. So the question now is, when is it going to get posted? I'm recording it next Tuesday with the band. It's just going to be, we're not going to be playing. It's just going to be, via Zoom. But it'll be a nice way to kind of learn a little bit more about, our process and stuff. If you guys have questions for the band, just write into the support area and just say, this is a question for the band podcast. And then I'll be sure to ask them. And then that email address is support@jazzedge.com. And that will go right into the support system. And then, so it will not be next week's episode. So that would be, let's see here. We're on episode 22 this week. So it will be episode 24. Episode 24 will be the episode with the band. The episode 23, I'm not quite sure what it's going to be yet. I might follow up on this Bill Evans Rootless Voicings Part 2. And then episode 24 will be with the band. Okay?
Thank you.
You got it. All right. So who has questions? Now is the time. You can ask me whatever questions you want for the next 57 minutes. So any questions? Go ahead, Joe.
I missed the first 40 minutes of yesterday's Q&A. And I was wondering, did you record that?
The
Dinner by the Dozen Q&A?
Oh, yeah, I did. But you know what? I don't think that I've posted it to the site yet. Let me just take a quick peek here, and I'll look on here. I don't believe that I posted it on the site. I wasn't able to get to that yesterday, but let me just double check that.
Where would that be when you do it?
So the Q&A sessions will all be, so that's going to be the one from Misty. So what you want to do is it'll be listed as number 12 right here, and I will put that up there later on today for you. Okay. So it will be up there later on. Thanks for reminding me, Joe. All right. Who else? And if you have a question on YouTube or Facebook, I'm streaming live there as well. Go ahead and chat in your question. Any of my friends here on Zoom, anyone else have questions?
I got a question, Willie, on what you mentioned yesterday about the 3/7s. I think it was on Marcus's performance or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You went in length talking about outlining the seventh and thirds of each chord in the piece for improvising. And I was thinking of that, and I really like that. I haven't tried experimenting with it yet, but what if you added a note from the melody in that measure to the 3 and the 7? So I was just wondering how that would come out to be, if that would actually aid even further doing your improvisation and keeping it tied to the melody.
Yeah. So what I would suggest, so let me answer that question, and I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about that concept again, just to kind of round up on that again and kind of give you another way of looking at it. A great way to begin improvisation is starting with the melody, right? I wouldn't worry about trying to take the melody and link it with your guide tones necessarily, because again, it's going to give you too much stuff to think about, right? And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help all of you guys to be able to clear away a lot of the clutter for improvisation, right? And when I say do this rather than that, I'm not saying that whatever that is bad stuff to learn. It's great stuff to learn. I mean, you can learn thousands of things, right? The problem, though, is time, focus, right? And being able to implement that into your playing. So if you're going to just take like Autumn Leaves, I would start with... And so you can kind of hear the melody baked in there, right? So I'm just literally playing the melody, and I'm literally just playing around with the melody. So what does that mean, to play around with the melody? Well, if the melody is, right, that's the first, on a C minor 7 chord, right? So when I do this, you know, first of all, the melody as it is see how long I'm holding that top note? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 2, 3, 4, 1. I'm holding it for 5 beats. So that gives you a lot of time in those 5 beats to do something. So the best way of starting is take whatever those melody notes that hold out for a while and then do something with them. Again, what is that do something? All right, well, you just try moving around by half steps, you know, whole steps. You could think scale, you know, but really just like thinking notes close to that melody note. Okay, so now you say like, all right, do I like the sound of that? Nah, it doesn't really sound all that great, right? Okay, but now that does, right? Well, why? We know we're on a C minor chord. These notes are going to work. But even if you didn't realize that these notes are going to work on the C minor chord, try playing some notes above, try playing some notes below, and then kind of see which ones sound good. The old adage that, you know, we as jazz musicians and, you know, many people have heard is that the right note is only a half step away. Okay, and it really kind of is true in jazz, right? So I hit that E, oh no, but I go to the F, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, now it resolves, right? So start by whoops. And so at least I get some notes in there. I get some ideas that I could start to play around with. All right, so now let's take a listen, or let's take a look rather, at, let's do Autumn Leaves again. All right, let me just pull that up just real quickly. Bear with me for a second. All right, and then this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a good approach for utilizing these guide tones. Okay, so let's just take the first line. All right, all we're going to do is focus on the first line of Autumn Leaves right now. All right, and so first of all, taking this first line, what are the guide tones? Right, the guide tones are the 3rd and the 7th of each of the chords. Right, so that means when I go to the C minor, I could play E flat or B flat. Again, which order? If I go E flat, B flat, E flat, B flat, it really doesn't matter, of course, okay? On F is E flat and A. On B flat major, it's D and A. And on E flat major, it's D and G. So the first thing that I would do is I would just go through and just try playing those guide tones. now immediately right there, what do you see, right? Do you see that? In fact, I'm not even going to play the left hand. I'm just going to play the guide tones in the right hand, just so you can really focus on that. C minor to F7, B flat major to E flat. So you notice those common tones? You see that beautiful, right? It just really like the voice movement there is just so smooth and connected. When I go from C minor 7 to F7 to B flat to E flat like that. Okay, and I'm holding the notes down. Obviously, I would play them. So a great way to start. This is in 4/4 time. You get one chord per measure. Do each of those guide tones for a half note. So you literally do this. Repeat it on me, all right? So you see how I'm just going the third to the seventh, then I went to the third and up to the seventh, then third, down to the seventh, third, up to the seventh. Do I have to do it that way? No, of course I could go third, seventh, seventh, third, third, seventh, seventh, third. But you could see that and hear that by playing them around a little bit, I can get some kind of different motion. So that's the first step. I just kind of play around with that, with those guide tones, and just so that I can kind of get the overall shape of the harmony in my right hand. Remember what I said yesterday, that you should be able to create a solo, no left hand, and still be able to hear that harmony in the right hand. So if I play... So you should still be able to hear autumn leaves in my solo. If I start doing something like this, right? You can't hear autumn leaves anymore. It's like I'm moving all over the place, and in that situation, I am not defining the harmony. But if I play the harmony in my left hand while doing that, let's just call it randomness in the right hand, it actually still works, right? So listen if I play those first notes. Right? And the reason that it works is because I am defining the harmony in the left hand. Now, that's an okay way to start, as I'm just kind of playing that randomness stuff going on, just keeping a line going on. It's a fine way to start by having the harmony in the left hand, and you're just playing whatever you can play in the right hand steadily. But as you progress in your improvisation, you want your improvisation to sound more cohesive, and you want to be able to really outline that harmony, right? And be able to do that with no left hand, right hand only. The way to do that is by focusing on those guide tones. It's the third and the seventh. Now, the question might be like, well, wait a minute. What about the root? What about the fifth? What about the ninth, the 13th? Can I use those notes? Of course you can use those notes, but always start by mastering the guide tones first, okay? A lot of times, if I were to ask a student, go ahead and do the guide tone line over this, they're like, yeah, I got it. But then when it comes to actually doing it, they can't do it in time. Right? So you should be able to go through this. And if I put this on, like, say, even like 180, right? Really cooking along here. Right now, you can hear right there, it's not a terrible solo, No. And in fact, that would be a perfectly fine way to begin your solo. Sometimes I even start solos that way because I just want that kind of that space in there, right? So now, after you get the third and the seventh down, the other two chords that you really have to kind of think about is the minor 7 flat 5 and the diminished chord. The minor 7 flat 5, when you go to A minor 7 flat 5, you could still think 3 and 7, but on a minor 7 flat 5, since the flat fifth is so unique and such a distinct sound, I also think of that flatted fifth as one of my guide tones. Same thing holds for a diminished chord. No diminished chords in here, but let's say I had C sharp diminished or E diminished or whatever, and this C sharp diminished, I would still think third and seventh would be my guide tones, but I could also throw that kind of flatted fifth in there as well as a guide tone, right? So the minor 7 flat 5 and the diminished chords, those guide tones, you can also bring in the fifth as well. But as you could see in this tune right here, like 98% of the chords, right, or 95% of the chords are all majors, minors, dominants. Just right here, 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 and here do I have the minor 7 flat 5, okay? And it's all the same chord as well, right? All right, so you start with that. You start by getting down your guide tone lines. And the reason we had this whole conversation yesterday is because, you know, Gustavo was asking me about scales and, well, what scales can I use? And can I use this scale on this chord and on that chord? And it's a great question and an extremely valid question to ask, because typically jazz improvisation has been based around a chord scale relationship. This is where we hear so much, oh, you're going to learn your modes. You know, here's your alter scale. Here's your half whole diminished scale. And you have this stacking of scales. And like I said before, you know, if any of you have the Jamie Aebersold books, I remember going through those 35 years ago. And
his manual.
yeah. And it's great stuff. It really is. Yeah. But in the back, again, you take a look, dominant seventh chord. You could use a Mixolydian scale. You can use a Lydian flat 7. You could use an altered scale. You could use a half whole diminished. And it goes, it goes on and on and on. And I remember myself asking the question of like, okay, that's great. I'm glad I can use 10 different scales on a dominant seventh chord. But the question that has not been answered yet for me is, which scale do I use? And the reality is, again, you can use any of them. It really just depends on what sound are you going for. So now the problem is, if I can use 8 to 10 scales on a chord, now it's left up to me to decide in the moment, all right, well, what scale am I going to use? And now I have to do all these calculations of scales and all of this kind of stuff. Again, too much to think about, right? It's too much stuff to think about. So you start by outlining the guide tones first. You do that first while you're working through those scales, right? So that then, you know, like say F7. Here, I can do my altered scale on that. Right? So I start by going through and I play my guide tones, but then when I get to the F7 chord, then, now bear in mind, this is after I've already gone through and I can do the guide tones, no problem. I can do them every single time. I know what they are. I feel comfortable with the guide tones. So once I feel comfortable with the guide tones, now I can start to do, all right, let me slow it down for you just so you can kind of see. We'll bring it down to 130. Okay, all right, so I did two things there. On the F7 chord, I brought in right, those 4 bottom notes of the altered scale. Remember how I said, you know, do the altered scale in 2 blocks, right? So I can kind of think of it like that and like that. There's my F altered scale. I break it up, so the bottom 4 and the top 4. Makes it a little bit more manageable for me to think of that scale rather than thinking of the entire scale. All right, so I start with, and then look at what I did on the E flat. So here I brought in that Lydian scale, right? So this is my E flat Lydian scale with the sharp 11 in there, right? So now I do that. I add the chords in the left hand. Whoops. Okay. Now I'm able to start to bridge the gap between guide tones and then bringing in some other scales, okay? But again, I'm not trying to utilize the entire scale. Why am I not trying to utilize the entire scale? Here, it's not so much of a problem because you have a full measure. But a lot of times we know you get into situations like this, right? Where you have a chord every 2 beats. You're not going to be able to play 7, 8 notes in 2 beats. I mean, you could, but I mean, come on, right? Like when we're first starting out, you're not going to play 2 groupings of 16th notes, you know, at 130 beats per minute, right? So instead, you think about just utilizing 4 notes of the scale. Okay. So, and again, the process is you go through, you do the guide tones, the 3rd and the 7th of each of the chords. See if you could do it just with the right hand, just to get the sound. It's great if you could play along with something like iReal Pro or some backing track so you can hear the harmony, right? So you start to build up these lines and start to build up the ideas and build up your, your improvisational line that's harmonically rooted. And you root that harmonically, right, by playing those guide tones. You get that down well so that, like, just bam, like in your sleep. If I say F minor 7, A flat, E flat. If I say B flat minor 7, flat 5, D flat and A flat, and the flat 5 is F flat, right, or E natural, however you want to think about it, right? Mm-hmm. So I really get those guide tones down really well. Then I can add in the left hand, add in either my rootless chords, my chord shells, whatever. Okay, this is what happens when I add in my rootless chords. Right? Sounds really nice. Okay. Once you can do that, then start to bring in some of these other scales. Like when on the F, I played the altered scale. On the E flat, I brought in that Lydian sound. Okay. Now, from there, you have these scales, right? And the question again, and Gustavo's fantastic question of like, well, which one can I use? Can I use Lydian flat 7 or can I use altered? Well, now at that point, now you start to play around with the sound of that. Okay. So first of all, Lydian flat 7 or altered is going to work on a dominant. So then I can go on my F7 and I could try playing around with this Lydian flat 7 sound. Okay. Again, I'm going to take 4 or 5 notes. Now I don't have to take the bottom 4, the top 4. I could also sandwich in and just do 4 right there. So let's say I take these 4 notes right here. See, on the E flat major, I came down those 4 notes of the Lydian scale. So now what I'm doing is I'm just taking a small part of the Lydian flat 7 scale, this, just so I can get the sound of it, right? So I can get the idea of it, right? Okay, that's kind of interesting. Now I can also I can start to bring in more notes of the scale if I want to, so I can get more of the scale sound and kind of play around. Okay, that's the sound of it. Then I can start to, like, as I play around with this more and look at it more, I can start to dig in a little bit deeper and really start to understand, well, really, what's the difference between my Mixolydian scale and Lydian flat 7? It's just that sharp 11 in there, right? That's the one note that changes in that scale. And that's like kind of like what I would consider to be the like the key note, the note that adds the most change in it. So then I can try messing around with that. Right? I can kind of like really hit that note and just to really get that sound in my ears, right? Then after you go through that, then if you want to start to bring in fuller scales, then that's fine as well. And then a great approach on that is literally practice and go through. I might do Dorian now. Okay, so you see on the G minor, I can like, I don't like that sound, right? right? Because it doesn't really go with C minor as well. So this is my G Dorian scale, right? But then I go to natural minor instead, right? Because the sound of that E natural, I didn't like it, right? Now, it's not to say that I can't still use that Dorian scale. I just didn't like that sound. And honestly, from a theory perspective, the Dorian isn't really a great choice to begin with. The natural minor would be better. But rather than digging into that theory and like, well, what's the theoretical correct thing? That's where you can start to use your ears a little bit, right? But you don't want to go down that road yet until you can outline the harmony utilizing your guide tones, right? Mm-hmm. That's the best way of getting into your improvisation to create an improvisation that's going to sound good.
Well, that's, now I'm beginning to see what is learning what we're learning, the scales and all that. But what I think would make things, it's like you're always saying, simplify, especially, and to stay without going too deep, but staying wide. The benefit of developing an ear, because if you can develop your ear, then you don't have to worry about 42 different scales, because you can almost hear what's going to sound good while you're improvising.
Yeah.
So it's not I'm going to play the altered scale or the diminished scale or whatever. This is what's going to sound good from my experience learning the scales, and like you said, listening to what you play. Then as you're playing and you have that ear, okay, this is going to sound good because I've played it in the standards. I've remembered what sounds good. Mm-hmm. And
let's talk about that for a second. The improving of the ear. First of all, I'm in complete agreement with you, and that's why I have a bunch of ear training stuff on the site as well, the ear training boot camp and all of that. But you have to be listening to what it is you're doing, and you have to start to soak that into your ears. Now, there is a misconception that, oh boy, if you want to play jazz or whatnot, you have to have superb ears and you need to be able to hear anything and any inversion and blah, blah. Like, what notes are those? Like, no, you do not need to have that, right? And I say that because I don't have that. Like, if you play that, I'm not going to be able to tell you every one of those notes that are in there, and I don't have perfect pitch either. And that's not what it's about. It's not about being able to hear every single thing, but it's about starting to, this ear for music or ear for jazz, as you start to hear the movement. Again, right? That's the motion you want to start to hear. Ba-da-do, ba-da-da-do, da, right? You want to be able to hear that, so then right? So you start to hear that motion, the motion of the chords, and how you hear that motion best is through those guide tones, right? They just lay it out so nicely that when you go through, right? And you can just hear that motion of the chords, moving through just with those guide tones. So the guide tones are your boulders. The scales are the sand that gets filled in between. Chromatic scale is the water that gets filled in even more, right? But that's the best way to start. Not to say that you don't work through those scales, not to say that you don't utilize those scales, but by coming out of the gate and like looking at like, okay, autumn lace, all right, C minor 7, I'm going to use, I'm going to use my Dorian scale, and on F7, I'm going to use an altered scale on that. On B flat major, I'm just going to use my major scale on that. And E flat, I'm going to use my Lydian, right? Do you see like all the thinking that you need to do in order to create an improvisation? It becomes extremely tedious. And then at that point, now you start to squeeze out all of the musicality, right? The other thing too is that almost every single time when somebody is learning to improvise, they almost always play too much, right? Too many notes. So the guide tones help to kind of pull you back a little bit. So you're not going to be playing as many notes. You're going to play fewer notes and then really be able to hear that harmony open up, that then you could say, right? So I'm still utilizing those guide tones, but I'm starting to fill them in a little bit, utilizing some scales, some chord tones, some other notes, okay? Maybe even notes on the melody, like you said. But that I find is a much, much better approach, a much cleaner approach to be able to get into your improvisation.
In another point, which was interesting yesterday when we were with Marcus, was when he said that you don't have to use the left hand all the time. And what's interesting, I was listening to a big band, Benny Goodman, and I was listening to the song, and all of a sudden he plays a solo, and wait a minute, there's no one else playing, and he's just playing a clarinet. And it was okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It didn't disturb me, and it sounded pretty good.
And you know why? It's because of layering. Because the last thing that you want to hear is the exact same density of music all of the time, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't want a wall of music coming at you. You want layers, right? And this is where like it even happens in rock music. You know, like maybe the drummer
like a little rest.
Like the drummer starts and then the guitar player comes in and the whole band, you know, it's like it's all of that layering. So when you pull out those other layers and it's just piano, just right hand alone, wow, it just opens it up. And what you're experiencing is your ears are being given a rest. And then when your ears are given a rest, even though there's still music going on, your ears are given a rest from all of the other density. So like if you look at like the layers of music, and this is why so many people learn piano, because this truly is the layers of music, right?
Yeah.
So the drums happen like, you know, still like tonally in this area. And by the way, you know, drummers tune their drums too to some specific notes. Some drummers do.
Yeah.
Like bass is like down in this area, right? If you had like a voice, it might be up here. If you had like, you know, like a sax or a piccolo or a flute, you know, you might be starting to get more up in this upper range. So when you hear all of these layers going on all of the time, it's like, whoa, too much. But as you pull them back, and then now it's just like, okay, now we're just going. Right, so you like kind of like see how like I could kind of creep it down there, and now I bring in some bass, and now like I'm changing those layers around. So it's a great point. It's a great observation. There's a question I got over here from YouTube from David. For the G minor, G flat, F7, E7 section, right there. The two bars are not in a given scale and is passing in nature. How do you approach improvising over that? Okay, so a lot of times when you have something like this, especially when it's chromatic like that, this is where your 4-note cells are perfect. They just work out just extremely well. So a 4-note cell is something like this on G minor. So literally start with the triads. Okay, that's it. Start with your triads. And you notice with your triads, you already got 3 of the 4 notes, okay? Then just add in the 9th from there. Especially if it's moving fast. Right? Sorry. And then you can work through all permutations. A lot of times I like going to an E flat 7 rather than that A minor 7 flat 5 there as well. So those 4-note cells are a great way of doing, you know, of approaching it. You can also, right? So that's coming right down the chord tones in the right hand. I'm just arpeggiating those. And I'm coming down. I can also go. You could also do stuff like this. This one's a little bit tough fingering wise to be able to get away with that. But basically what I'm saying is you can go down and then up. You know, so depending on the speed, you might be able to work that out. But the 4-note cells are a great way of doing that. And again, what do you have here? You have like the workings of your Dorian scale, workings of maybe a Mixolydian scale there, again, maybe another Dorian scale there, another, you know, Mixolydian scale there. You could say, okay, but wait a second, on the E7, say, or on the G flat, I don't want to just do that. I want to kind of bring in that altered sound. Okay. Do the first 4 notes of that. Gorgeous, right? And so these are the notes I'm playing. So this and that, okay, which looks a little bit weird. This is the first 4 notes of my G flat altered scale, right? And then these are the first 4 notes of my E altered scale. So great question, David. Oh, good. Thanks. I learned something today. Well, that's definitely the point. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Stefan, I want to come to 3 weeks in the U.S. and want to know if you also practice foreign. I'm not quite sure what that means. If you also practice foreigner from some icon, which I can't really see from here. So, Tom, you also had a question. You had your hand up.
Hi, Willie.
Hey, Tom.
You went so far beyond it, but let me kind of go back to where we started with this question about starting your improv with the melody.
Yep.
Well, as an example, you play the whole song. At the end of the song, there's sort of this dramatic ending, and then you go back and you start your improv. Shouldn't you skip that dramatic ending and just end that A section just like you would the other 2 A sections?
Let me just get a piece of information from you. All right. So first of all, are we talking Autumn Leaves?
No.
All right.
Actually,
so now when you say dramatic ending, are you talking in general any tune, or are we talking of a
general
specific...
any tune? I mean, this is the nearness of you that I've been working on.
Okay.
And it has a very dramatic ending that I've found somewhere and put into it. And to me, it just sounds wrong to go ahead and play that whole thing, and then you get to the end, and then you go, 2, 5, 1, and start the song over again.
Yep.
Or start the improv. So my point is, you should just send it. It's just the nearness of you, do, 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 and then start.
Yes.
And then start to improv over the bridge.
Okay,
section.
You could do that. Now, what you might need to do, though, is, let's pull up the nearness of you here. All right, so if you're going through this, I don't know why this thing keeps popping out on me here.
Instead of going da 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 da, just skip that part and go da 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 da. And then
so like you could go back to say the bridge in your improv. So you're getting to the end of the tune, right? And then you want to like first of all, this is a kind of a weird. Okay, I see. They're calling that a third ending, which is a little odd, but okay.
Yeah,
whatever.
that's what I mean. It's a different ending, and it doesn't sound right to start over again after you've done that.
Yeah. So what you might end up doing is play A, B, A, right? Do this A here, probably the second ending. Forget that this this third ending, because yes, this right here, these four chords, right? That's going to like kind of like really lead it up, you know, to an end. So you're absolutely right. And what you're hearing is correct. Like if the ending of a tune is big and dramatic, and it seems like, hey, look, your ears are telling you I'm coming to the end of the tune, right? So if you're coming to the end of the tune, that's probably best saved for the ending. And a lot of times what you will see on chord charts, you don't always see it on something like iReal Pro, but what you'll see in chord charts is that ending is either written as a coda, or it might even be notated saying play last time only, right? So in a situation like that, if it sounds to you like, wait, this is too much, this is too big to end like this, then yes, then just, you know, end the nearness of you, and then do a 2-5 and a,
Except I'd like to go right into
and then go into your
something
improv
over the
from
bridge.
there. Yep. So does that answer your question, Tom?
Well, yeah, except then instead of doing what you did, you go da 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 da, and then you improvise over the chords in the bridge.
So if you want to do that, if you're going to be ending on the F, right? So you're ending on the F, and then you're going to get back to the G minor. So then you're probably going to want to put in like, so you see, like, I'll hit like an A minor 7 flat 5 to a D7, and then go to the G minor. So typically what you would happen is you would end on an F, okay? And then this would probably be like a 2-5 taking you back to the top, right? So what you would do is you would end on the F, but then this 2-5 here would not be a 2-5 that resolves back to F. It would be a 2-5 that resolves you over here to G minor, okay? So
Just go right to E minor and then D minor.
A minor 7 flat 5, then D7. Okay, and the reason you do A minor 7 flat 5 is because you're going to a minor chord here. Minor 7 flat 5 sounds better resolving to a minor chord.
Okay, and then I have a totally different A section that I play last.
Okay,
That's
yeah, sure.
Why I like that, and then that goes into the
Yeah,
all right. Thank you.
Nothing wrong with that at all. Here's the thing: this is my rule of thumb. Everyone's going to have their own rules, but this is my rule. Anything that I do to a song has to complement the song. Okay, so if I do something to a song that really makes it sound like if I'm like, let's say I'm going to be like, oh, you know, I really want to get artsy fartsy with this, and I'm going to play an F sharp down here while playing the melody. Right? Like, does that really go with the tune? No, it doesn't, right? So anything that you do reharm wise, arranging wise, whatever, you want to make sure that it like kind of complements the tune. If I do, right? I mean, I'm not sure that that would definitely complement the tune. But if I want to change styles, that's fine. My rule of thumb is, does this complement the tune? Am I adding to the tune, adding my own flavor and flair to it? Or am I playing something that's just so bombastic and silly just because, oh, I'm going to do it? You know, if that's my attitude, then I feel like I'm not being a good musician. As a good musician, I should always complement the song. If not, then write your own stuff, right? That's what I always think. If you want to do like, you know, you want to do that, well, don't do it over, you know, the nearness of you, which is a beautiful ballad, right? Instead, write your own thing, you know, and you could even make it kind of take the melody of the nearness of you and kind of tweak it a little bit to make it your own. But then you're not in my opinion, destroying a classic standard by doing something silly over the top of it. Now, within that, there's a wide range of what you can do. You can move into odd meter, play it in 3, play it in 7, play it in 5. You could change styles. Nothing says you can't do. Like nothing says you can't do it like in like kind of a rock style. Kind of like a slow bluesy thing. Sure, you could do all of that as long as it complements the song. But again, that's my rule. Everyone has to make up their own rule as to like what they feel comfortable doing to songs or not. I'll tell you a quick anecdote. Sometimes when I've done stuff on the site and then take like a rock tune and play it jazzy, whoo boy, some people's feathers get really ruffled with that. You don't take a Beatles tune and make it jazz. It's a rock tune. You keep it like that. All right, well, that's, again, that's the different, takes on music, but I felt like my arrangement did justice to the tune. That person felt differently. And that's the beauty of music. Everyone can have their own opinion about it. But anyway, getting back to what you were saying, I think that's a great idea. Like if you have your arrangement, you have like your piece of it that you like saving for the end, by all means, go ahead and do that.
Well, then I'm only doing a 16-bar improv, or actually 8.
Yeah, so you're just improvising just over the bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
And then it's not, it's not too long.
Yeah, and in fact, I got to be honest with you, that's a super smart way of doing it, because now it's like you're not improvising over 32 bars, 64 bars, 100, you're just improvising over something small and manageable right now. As your skills increase, right, and your technique and your ears and knowledge and all of that, you're going to start to naturally gravitate into more. I love that approach more than the student that's getting started with improvisation. I'm going to be like, I'm going to take 4 choruses on this tune and I'm going to butcher every one of them, right? It's like, you don't want to do that, right? Starting off, P.T. Barnum, leave them wanting more, right? Leave them wanting more. So 8 measures of improv. Okay, nice, tasty improv. Maybe even in that improv too, you might even write that out, or you might have that planned out as to what you're going to play. So is it improv or composition? Who cares? It doesn't really matter. The point is you're adding your own 8 measures into that music, which I think is a great idea. Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
You got it. Oh, Devin, just a note. I played out last Thursday, Friday, never felt better about my improv. Thank you, Willie. Oh, well, thank you, Devin, for sharing that. I appreciate that. I love that. Let's see. Arturo asks, can you use a sharp 5, sharp 9 alteration on this one? Ooh, I'm just not sure what you mean by this one. Likely, the answer is yes, as long as it works with the melody. So here's the deal. When you're doing, well, maybe this is on Autumn Leaves. I'm not sure. Arturo, you can let me know if it's not on Autumn Leaves. But when we take a look at, something like this, the F7 chord, right? We know on a dominant 7th chord, we could throw in the kitchen sink. Flat 9, sharp 9, sharp 11, flat 5, flat 13, all of those alterations. But a lot of it is going to depend on the melody. So here I went to a sharp 11, right? Here's sharp 5 in there, right? Since the melody decays out, on that F7 chord, I could put in just about anything. Flat 9, sharp 11, 13. E flat major 7 with a sharp 11 in there, because the melody is decayed out, so I don't have to worry about it. But let's just say, for instance, let's just say that, let's just say, just for argument's sake right now, the melody is starting, and then this E flat, which is really on C, which I know, but let's just say the E flat is on F7. Okay, well, even with that E flat, I could throw in any of these tensions in here, because that's a chord tone, right? Let's say that now my melody note is, so it's still on F7 here, but the melody note is going to be the 9th of my chord. Okay, so now in that case, I don't want to throw in, obviously, like sharp 9, flat 9. And let me bring it up here, right? So like right? I wouldn't want that in there. Could I put in sharp 5, flat 13? Yeah, that sounds nice with that 9th in there, right? So everything is dependent upon the melody. When there's no melody going on, well, now it's the kitchen sink again, right? So I could go C minor 7, C minor 7, F7, B flat major, E flat major, A minor 7 flat 5, D7, you know, with all this on there, right? So I could throw in any of those chords then, as long as they work with the chord. So on a minor 7 chord, I could put that 11th in there, right? No problem, right? At that point, the only thing that you have to really consider then is the soloist that you're working with or the other musicians that you're working with. If I'm playing, say, with a guitar player and the chord is F7, all right, well, now I'm probably going to maybe lay back a little bit, or at the very least, I'm going to be listening intently to what the guitar player is doing. A lot of times when you have guitar and piano, the guitar might just be chunking chords along, right? So now let's say that the guitar player is doing this chord here with the sharp 9 in there, right? And the flat 13 in there. And over here, I'm like, you know, I'm just going to play my regular, you know, block chord with the 9th in there. Doesn't sound very good. So that's where you would have to utilize your ears to be listening to the other musicians. So rule of thumb is this. Anytime you're going to alter a chord, you have to think about how does that alteration affect the melody, right? And if the melody note is here, you're likely going to want to stay away from any note that is a half step away from that melody note, because that's going to be very difficult for someone to sing over, right? So if that's your melody note, then you're going to think, okay, well, what notes in that chord or what tensions will go with that melody note, right? That's when playing the melody. When the melody is decayed, or you're in solo land, or you're doing an intro or anything like that, you don't have to worry about any other musicians. You play whatever you want on that, on that chord. You could even change the chord quality as well, right? You could change that from F7 into even like an F major. Sometimes what I'll do is I will go through as like kind of an artsy little thing and change the quality of all the chords, right? So make them all major chords. So, so the first A section, I did all major chords: C major, F major, B flat, E flat, A, D, G, and then I can kind of play around with that and get a different sound. Now, again, I wouldn't do that while playing the melody, and I certainly wouldn't do that backing up a soloist unless, of course, they knew that we were going to do that, right? But you really have sky is the limit, and that's one of the challenging things, is that since sky is the limit, you could do just about anything you want. Then what should you do and what shouldn't you do? And again, it all is based upon that melody. If you're playing the melody, make sure the chords go along with the melody. Diana asks, Willie, if dominant 7 resolves down a 5th, can it also resolve up a 4th? Yes. If we say that, do we refer to the piano keys left and right, or the circle of 4ths or 5ths? Well, dominant resolution is to the left or counterclockwise in the circle of 5ths, right? So if this is your circle of 5ths, I'm not going to bother to load it up right now. So it's C, G, D, right? So circle of 5ths goes that way clockwise. If you go backwards or counterclockwise in the circle of 5ths, that's what we call our cycle of 4ths or circle of 4ths, right? So that's C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, right? And then that's your dominant motion. So C7 resolves to F7. F7 resolves to B flat. B flat 7 resolves to E flat, and so forth, right? So that's typically what we would be thinking of in terms of our dominant motion. In terms of like when you say piano keys left or right, I haven't heard that. So I haven't heard in terms of like, if I'm thinking, F7 resolving down to B flat, I'm not thinking F7 moving to the left to B flat or moving to the right to B flat. I just think F7 resolving down to B flat, right? Or resolving to B flat. I say resolving down, right? But it's not down or up. It's either. It's just resolving to, right? So, yeah, so hopefully that helps. Let's see. All right, any other questions before we wrap up for the day? I got time to answer one more question. Going once. Going twice.
Just a quick one, Willie. Have you used a foot pedal with iReal Pro at all yourself?
No, I have not.
Okay. I was looking for YouTube videos and I couldn't find one. Anyone's actually using a foot pedal with iReal Pro.
Well, here's the thing about iReal Pro. All right, so first of all, it's active right now. Okay, so all I do is hit my space bar and I can start it and stop it. Okay, so that means that the keyboard works with iReal Pro. Okay. The foot pedal, the USB foot pedals or Bluetooth foot pedals, Bluetooth actually, not USB,
right.
Sorry. The Bluetooth foot pedals mimic this. And typically what you could do is, if you have a foot pedal, let's say it's 2 buttons on a foot pedal. This button right here might be your space bar. You could usually set that. This button over here might be like, I don't know, the return key, all right? So, so typically those Bluetooth foot pedals will mimic the actual computer keyboard, and then so basically so if I hit the foot pedal, it's really no different than hitting the space bar. But again, let's say I'm over here on this, I can hit the space bar all day and nothing's going to happen. I need to make sure that iReal Pro is active, then it will activate it.
Okay.
Devin, you had a question? No. Leslie, do you have a question, Leslie? Oh, okay.
I had one, but
go ahead, Kevin.
It can. I'll defer it till later.
Well, you could ask it now if you want.
Yeah, it's probably too extensive.
Oh, now
you're
now you got us all.
I know you got to cut out soon, and it's probably going to take too long to delve into.
Got to give it to me now. I got to hear it now. Now I'm intrigued. I got 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'll try to be succinct, but so we've been talking about using scales, using chord tones, using scale cells, all that sort of thing, and I was just kind of sitting here making notes to myself, and as a beginning improviser, and I suspect where a lot of people are beginning to, early intermediate or whatever, I'm kind of looking for an approach where I really need to be spending my time. There's so many possibilities. Like, I'll bounce back and forth between, thinking, okay, well, I'm going to focus on key centers. And so I'll be, going down that whole rabbit hole of trying to exhaust major scales over key centers within each tune or over a common progression. Or maybe I'll do the same thing with pentatonics, or maybe that I'll go down the blues scale path. And then I'll think, no, wait a minute, that's not working. I need to focus on chord tones. So now, so I'm going through tunes and progressions, working on arpeggiating chord tones and trying to work through all my major, minor, dominant arpeggios and things like that. Now we're talking about guide tones, working those in. And then, also tied in with chord tones, we've got the whole realm of, all right, now we're introducing approach tones. So, there's probably like 10 different things I can be practicing at any given time. And I'm bouncing from one to the other. So what I really, I guess, and also, like we were talking about, the major scale thing or the scale approach works good if you've got your left hand going or you've got some accompaniment like, band in a box or something backing you up where you can hear the chords. But if you just play a bunch of major scales by yourself, nobody's going to have a clue what you're doing. So it just kind of sounds like random running of scales.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in a nutshell, what is the most effective way? Where should a beginning to intermediate improviser really be spending the majority of their time? Focusing on chord tones over, just various tunes and progressions? I keep coming back to that and thinking maybe that's the best place where I should be really focusing. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
All right. So great question. A very fair and valid question. And you're not the only one to have that question. All right. First of all, that's why I created this. Okay. Hands down, I would do these three things. All right. Piano Essentials, Confident Improviser, Standards by the Dozen. Right. And I know that you're working through those. So when I say you should do these three things, it's like, okay, but I'm already doing those and I want to do something more. So my first thing that I would say is make sure that when you're doing this stuff, you really are doing it. Okay. So like Piano Essentials, that's your major scales in all 12 keys, like hands together, 2 octaves, contrary motion. That's also going through major, minor, dominant 7th chords, your triads, all of that. So right there in this, there's a lot. And then the question that you have to always ask yourself before you move outside of this trifecta here is, did I really master this? Like, do I have it at 80%? Okay. Are you going to get it at 100%? Normally not, right? But at least to 80%. Are you at least at 80%? Confident Improviser. Have you gone through all of those? Have you gone through all of those exercises? Have you taken a look at the inspiration stuff? And are you at 80% in that, right? Standards by the Dozen. Have you worked through a standard? Now, if you don't want to do Standards by the Dozen, you want to do your own standards, that's absolutely fine as well. And then I would say then definitely these first two, especially if you're interested in improvisation, right? So that's the first place to start, is really making sure that you're going through these 3 courses and you're getting them to 80%, right? I don't say that because I made these courses. I say that because I look back on how I learned. I look back on my, 45 years of playing the piano. Actually, no, I was like a little tiny when I started playing the piano, right? So I mean, like decades of working through this stuff, gigs, concerts, recordings, all of that stuff. That's why I created this. So I would stick with this. This is a great path to follow. Now, the challenge, though, is then Willie Mayette comes along, and then I'm talking about like, oh, okay, well, you could do guide tones, and you could start to fill in guide tones. You could do this, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. And the challenging part is that, number one, I'm passionate about music. I love to share different ideas, but that gets challenging for you guys because now you have to kind of keep your blinders on and not get sidetracked by the next shiny thing. The other reason that I do it, besides being passionate about music, is that sometimes students go through this stuff, but then as I'm explaining these different concepts and different ideas, some light bulb went off for them. Because again, especially when it comes to improvisation, there's no like, oh, just go pick up the improvisation book and read it cover to cover, and now you know improv. No such thing, right? It's so organic, and it's such a moving target that there's so many things to learn. You're absolutely right. You might spend months just working on blues scales. You might spend months working on pentatonic scales, right? So start first of all with these, right? Go through these, make sure that you're really working through those. The time that you have, right? So like, let's say that this takes up, I don't know, 50% of your time, right? And you have some more time to practice. Then you could take a concept like, okay, guide tones, right? Now, this is the way that you utilize a new concept. You take a new concept and okay, so Willie said guide tones. All right, let me go through and see if I could do this, right? Right? So now I don't have that 80%. Right? So if I don't have that at 80%, then that might be something that I dig into a little bit, right? Until finally I can get to like, okay, right? And I can play it. So you kind of focus on that one concept a little bit, right? So you go through the trifecta. You keep working through that because it really will help you in the end. But the next shiny thing, if you want to, take some time on that shiny object like guide tones, then fine, focus on that for a little bit until you feel like, okay, I got it. Don't worry about trying to master it. Like really like Keith Jarrett, Bill Evans mastering it, all right? Because that's just like, it could literally take a lifetime to go through that. Going through guide tones on this stuff, I'll still make mistakes now and again, but I have it down well enough that in a pinch, I can pull it out, right? And I can play them. But if you're kind of struggling around on something, then you practice that until you feel comfortable with it. Then you can move on to that next shiny thing. All the while keeping this as your foundation. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And I've gone through probably say 16 to 17 of the Confident Improviser courses before I kind of fell off the bandwagon.
Mm-hmm.
And, most of them I could get I'm not a piano player by profession. I'm a drummer and a percussionist. So, the technique stuff, I've got adequate technique that I can play the major scales and, the chords and all of that kind of stuff. So it's not that, but we get into like chord tones with approach tones and that sort of thing,
mm-hmm.
then it sort of adds another layer of complexity to it.
Yep.
I'm okay with just the plain chord tones, but, we're starting to throw in the approach tones and getting into a little more chromaticism and things like that. So I can kind of like stay where I am, say at level 16 or 17 of the Confident Improviser forever, probably. Well,
again, on that, if you're at 16, try to get to 80%. If you could do the exercises to 80%, right? Which I know that you could do that. I mean, you're just reading the exercises.
Right.
So now you move on to the next one. Right? And then taking chord tones, again, if you take something like, Autumn Leaves or whatnot, make sure you can... Right? Make sure that you can really go through and arpeggiate those. If you can't do that, well, then that's what you focus some attention on. I mean,
I can do that on like Autumn Leaves. I can play the chord tones and the arpeggios and things like that. And,
but
and other,
when you say you could play them, if I asked you, like if I said, okay, no, right? Right? So like, how well can you play them? Right? And then, not to psychoanalyze or anything, but I could hear even like when you say, yeah, I could do the major scales. I could do it like I want it to be like, I could do the major scales, right? You want me to play the major scales? I'll play all 12 major scales for you right now. I have down the major scales. It's that level of confidence that you want before you then move on to the next thing. Because just like a great example actually is math. Okay, especially since music is so math driven as well. Like in math, if you're like, I know my times table. Okay, well, it can't be like, yeah, I know it. And then you move on to algebra and then it's like, whoa, wait a second. It has to be like, I know my times table, right? I might make a mistake now and again, but I feel confident in it, right? So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that confidence in the knowledge that you have because everything is stacked on top of each other, right? And as you already know, like your chord tones, you're like, okay, yeah, I could go through and I could play my chord tones and stuff. All right, how many standards have you done that over? Can you take 5 standards, put on a backing track, and improvise utilizing your chord tones, right?
No, but that's the point I'm getting to. So let's assume that I could do Autumn Leaves at about the tempo you were doing. I think I could, with a little bit, pretty much right now, if I had to, at least get through it, just with the arpeggios of chord tones at Autumn Leaves at that speed. But I couldn't do it to a lot of other tunes. I could maybe do it to All the Things You Are, something like that.
So then what you
But
want to do is
I can only do it to maybe those two tunes.
So
So
then-
should I spend the rest of my time like doing that with a dozen tunes before I start worrying about throwing in approach tones or you know,
Yeah.
working into the major scales or focusing on key centers and all
So
of that?
remember this. Remember, I've talked about going deep or going wide. Going deep is when you take one tune, like let's use Autumn Leaves as an example. I'm going to go through and I'm going to do all this stuff on Autumn Leaves. I'm going to practice it for months and months and months and months before I move on to the next tune. The problem with that approach is that when you try to move all of that data that you've acquired on Autumn Leaves to another tune, it's a lot of work, because what you've done is you've done this, you've layered on that tune. So what you want to do is you want to take, rather than layering on one song, okay, take one layer on one song and then be like, okay, I got layer one on that one song. Let me put it off to the side. Let me get a new tune. Let me get layer one. Okay, let me put that off to the side. Next tune, layer one, all right? So like we've said, like shells. Make sure you, right? Make sure you could go through, you could play those shells. All right, great. You could do it on Autumn Leaves. Can you do it on another 4, 5, 6 standards? Once you could do that on 4, 5, 6 standards, now you've gone wide with a concept. But I take one concept and I try going wide on multiple standards. What that's going to do for you is that's going to lock in that one concept, right? It's going to lock in, like, again, let's say I'm doing shelves. All right, I could play shelves on 5, 6, 7 different standards. Okay, well, at that point, you should pretty well know your chord shelves, right? Or at least have a pretty good idea, you know? So it sounds like what you should be doing is take the chord tones, improvisation, do it over Autumn Leaves, do it over All the Things You Are, but then do it over, I don't know, How High the Moon, The Nearness of You, Fly Me to the Moon, whatever tune you want to do it over, all right? The other thing, too, that's really important is make sure that you're recording. Join in on Tuesday, right? Join in on that Tuesday coaching session, because then I can hear your playing and I can give you feedback, and then we can go from there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I know real quickly here, one last thing. I was, like I started going through the standards by the dozen, but like the first thing that comes up in the improv section is, taking the shells and then playing major scales to a large degree over the shells. Yep. So, I've spent time, I maybe am practicing chord tones a lot, and then I'll hit that. And I'll say, oh, well, wait a minute. Maybe I should be really playing shells and practicing major scales and, thinking in the key.
Nope.
So
take whatever concept you're doing, take that one concept, apply it wide. And then when I say wide, that's at least 5 tunes. Okay. So let's establish that wide means at least 5 songs that you're doing that one concept to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just going to stop on the confident improviser at the level where I am, 17 or so, 18, whatever it is, and just focus on half a dozen tunes or so, maybe just with chord tones and shells.
That's fine.
Improv.
But again, record yourself on video, use the Tuesday session, right? Use that as your weekly accountability, okay? So set a goal for yourself. Say, hey, look, you know what? Every 2 weeks, I'm putting a video up there for Willie to take a look at, utilizing chord tones for my improvisation, right? So you utilize that as your accountability. Okay?
Okay.
All right. And let's see here. Let me just... thank you, Marilyn. This is wonderful. You've given us a roadmap by using guide tones. Thank you, Marilyn. Leslie, great lesson. Basically semi-long, but the 3 courses are perfect to know. Okay, thank you very much, Leslie. Appreciate that. Ted, would Chord Essentials add to the trifecta in addition to Piano Essentials? Chord Essentials is a great course to go through as well. That's great if you want to kind of get down different styles. So if you're interested in more than just jazz, then definitely Chord Essentials would be fantastic. Obviously, that's going to change this trifecta into a quadfecta, all right? So obviously, you're going to have to balance your time a little bit more in that. What you could do is you could alternate, bounce back and forth between Piano Essentials in the key of C, then Chord Essentials key of C, Piano Essentials key of D, chord essentials key of D. You could kind of do that thing as well. Just real quick, Arturo, you were asking about chordal chords. Absolutely, you can use chordal chords as well. I have a whole bunch of courses on the site for chordal, so you could check that out. All right, so anyway, thanks, guys. Gonna go get the kiddos at school, so I will see you guys later. Remember, tomorrow we will be doing our Confident Improviser session at 1 o'clock, so hopefully I'll see you guys there. Keep the questions coming. Kevin, be sure to come back tomorrow, and then we could follow up on that conversation. And if you have a chance tonight, put together a video of some chord improvisation, because I'd like to hear it tomorrow. So there's your accountability, if you could do it for tomorrow. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, though. All right.
Okay, thanks.
All right. I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.